grab your seats, why don't you do that as well? That would be fantastic. Did anybody watch the storm Wednesday night? Stood outside, watched that lightning shoot across the sky, the thunder rumble. We were in a plane. We were coming into land at Manchester Airport, and if you fly with any regularity, you learn that what they say over the tannoy, what the words are different from the meaning. So the pilot says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 20 minutes to landing." And then 10 minutes later, he says, "We've just been asked to circle around Manchester Airport. There are a few other planes doing the same thing. There's a little bit of weather." I've flown enough to know what that means. It means this: we don't know what to do. It is so bad down there, they haven't worked out the options yet. 10 minutes later, this is the announcement: 10 minutes to landing. And I'm thinking to myself, nothing's changed outside my window. The lightning is still going, the thunder is still rumbling, it still looks pretty violent, and it was. And we came down through it. It was one of those flights that you want to forget ever happened. The plane was bouncing all over the place. For the sake of cleanliness, people were filling bags. It was pretty horrendous. And the pilot kind of dropped it out of the sky at the last minute and landed it, little bounce, and then we came in. And you know it was bad. You know it's bad when a British crowd of people clapped the pilot. Okay? If you ever fly into Poland or from Poland here, if you're Polish, you know this, Poles always clap the landing every single time. Probably because they've lived through a communist era where they wondered whether they'd ever land. Okay? But when British people clap the pilot, it's been bad. I was on my feet. I'm going, he's a great man. He's a great man. We're in a series called Influence. And the title that I got this evening is My Biggest Influence. I'd love to talk about Pastor Glenn. However, it's a really difficult title. Let me tell you a story to help you kind of see why I think it's difficult. There's a Sunday school class happening, a kids' church event. And the leader of the event says, "Children, I'm going to describe something to you. Can you tell me what this is?" This is actually the voice I use when I'm doing my mum. "Children, I'm going to describe something to you. Can you guess what it is? It's small, it's grey, it's furry, and it collects nuts for the winter." The little boy puts his hand up. The teacher goes, "Colin, what is it?" I wanted to call my dog Colin. How good would that be, standing on a field? "Colin!" Oh, I got outvoted. "Colin, what do you think it is?" So Colin goes, "Well, sounds like a squirrel to me, but I'm sure the answer's Jesus." Titles like this, what's your biggest influence? You feel it probably should be Jesus, or the Holy Spirit, or my wife. One of those three, any order you pick. Maybe my mum and dad, maybe Glenn and Soph, maybe my pastors in London, they were called Ken and Christine, maybe my youth pastors growing up. It's kind of a difficult one to sort of narrow it down and who's been the biggest influence of my life. The truth is, most of those people are still in my life. And Pastor Glenn taught this morning, and one of the verses that he talked about is where it talks about where iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another, and there has to be a proximity, an ongoing relationship that allows that growth to occur. And that happens in all those relationships for me still. That still goes on. So I thought about those, and I put those aside. And as I started to think, I felt the Lord remind me about a someone. It was 1999. We were getting ready to party, and looking forward in the year, there's some incredible things happened in 99. Foz will remember this. United did the treble. Yes. Glenn will remember this. Hit Me Baby One More Time was at the top of the charts. Jason will remember because Millennium Prayer was the Christmas #1. It was a big deal for him. And you know, The Matrix and Fight Club, they were the big films of the year. 99, big year 99. We all thought the world would collapse and die, but the clock just ticked over. And we carried on. And in 99, we were youth pastors in Dagenham in the East End. And there was a guest speaker coming to do a weekend that I had never met before, but my life had already been changed by him. There's an interesting word that I've been thinking about this week, and it's the word trajectory. Trajectory. That our life has a direction that it's going in, a trajectory that it's on. And trajectory can be affected by the very smallest things. And any small change in trajectory now can have a massive change in destination in your future. Sometimes when we talk about the biggest influences, we look for the kapow moment, don't we? The massive moment where you walked in and everything was completely and utterly different. For me, I've had one of those. That was the day that I met Jesus. The day that my life was transformed, where he forgave my sin and he set me free. That was the kapow moment. But I want to talk about another moment, another time. But it already happened before, and it was about to happen again with the same guy, 99. In 1982, I hadn't been born in 82. 1982, I was 10 years of age, and we were living in Bolton. I say we were living. My parents never moved house. They lived in Bolton. And 10 years of age, my parents went to this meeting on a park in Bolton called Queen's Park. And it was every night of the week for, I think it was seven nights, which would be every night of the week. And they went to hear this guy preaching. And we were going to a Methodist church, which was a really great social environment for us as a family. We had loads of friends. We as kids had friends. My parents had loads of friends. And it was a great social environment. They went to this place and they realized they heard people preach about Jesus probably for the first time in years. And the impact of that changed their lives so much that they made a decision to change churches. The guy who was preaching was a guy called Pastor Andrew Shearman. He preached that week. I never met him. I never went to any events. But his preaching changed my life. Because my parents picked us up, my brother and I, moved us to another church. It's maybe, at the best, a quarter of a mile between the buildings. At absolute best. But that quarter mile changed the trajectory of my life forever. Now, that's happened before. That's happened in all sorts of times and places. In fact, I would tell you that I'm only stood on this stage because of a phone call I made 18 and a half years ago, where there was this young guy and his wife who moved over from Australia to Sheffield, had no friends. I felt sorry for them. I phoned him up and I said, "Hey, do you want a friend in England?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "He's not available, but I'll come round." And literally, I phoned Pastor Glenn. I said, "Hey, listen, we were youth pastors, they were youth pastors." I said, "Hey, can we come hang out for a weekend?" One phone call. But the trajectory of my life changed. Andrew Shearman preached, we changed churches, and the trajectory of my life shifted. Because I went to that church, I went to the theological college that I went to because it was attached to that church. And because I went to that college, I met this beautiful lady. We got married and had 3 children. Important that I give you that in the correct order. And the trajectory of our lives changed. But there was this one guy, 1999, youth pastors. Church is growing pretty quickly. There's about 150 people when we joined the church. We thought we were going to this really big youth group. There was 4. 4 in any measure of measurement, unless you've got 1 or 0, is not big. So I'm kind of like, oh, this is interesting. The youth had started to grow. The church had started to grow. This guest speaker came, Andrew Shearman. I thought, I've never met him. I don't know anything about him. That weekend changed who I am. I can, in all honesty, point back to that one time and that one day and say, that changed who I am. In the book of Daniel, in chapter 5, there's this moment, and you may know this, you may have been in church or not been in church, but you might have heard the story where the king, who's called Belshazzar, is throwing a wild party, and in the middle of the wild party, God judges him. And the hand of a man appears in the middle of the room and starts to write on the wall with the fingers of this hand. And it writes 4 words on the wall. The words aren't particularly important for tonight. It writes these 4 words. No one knows what they mean. And then they eventually invite Daniel in. In Daniel chapter 5, Daniel walks in. He says, hey, I'll interpret it for you. This is what it means. You're in big trouble. God has judged you, and judgment is coming tonight. And it did. The weekend that this guy came to preach, he did for me what Daniel did for the king. He read the writing on the wall and joined the dots. And when he joined the dots together, it was like the light switch was flicked on, and I understood who I was, and the trajectory changed. Everything was different. It's hard to quantify, but let me try and grab this for you. When the Old Testament closes in the book of Malachi, it closes really on some interesting ideas and interesting thoughts. And then there's 400 years from the end of the Old Testament to the start of the New Testament. 400 years where God is silent. He doesn't speak. There's no message from heaven. There's no prophets. There's nothing going on. It's absolute silence from God for 400 years. And then God sends John the Baptist. John the Baptist is God's announcement figure for the start of God speaking again. And not just God speaking a little bit, but to announce that Jesus is coming, the Messiah is about to arrive. He's about to turn the world entirely upside down. And John is sent. And John's incredible. He's incredible. He is a wild man in every sense of the word. He lives out in the desert. He wears camel hair clothes. He is Del Boy. He has a camel hair clothes, a leather belt. The Bible tells us that he eats locusts and honey. I mean, he's just, everything about him is just a little bit edgy, a little bit wild, a little bit difficult. You know, you just think, what would he be like in a conversation? He's going to be blunt and to the point. In fact, we know that because his message was this: repent because you're going to die. That was his message. That was what he preached, and that was how he preached it. He was so powerful that people started leaving the cities in droves to go into the wilderness to meet John. They started to go to listen to what he said, to hear the words that he said. They poured out, and the religious came as well. Because religious people like to observe things, to make a judgment on whether it's right or wrong. So the religious rolled up, and they looked at John, and John just basically went, nah, you're not judging me. So he said, hey, he got into it. He said, you horde of vipers. Oh, I like John a lot. I mean, he just kind of went for it at these people. You know, he just let rip at these people. And it's incredible. A few chapters later, after Jesus has appeared and started to teach, he gets to Matthew chapter 11, and we're going to read these verses together. Matthew chapter 11, as Jesus is trying to describe it, he says, I tell you the truth, Jesus says, among those born of women, there's not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. That's a big commendation. Like if you flick back through the Old Testament, there's a few people who've been born of women. Moses, Abraham, Joshua, Joseph, Deborah, Jacob, Esther. The list goes on and on. They are giants of the faith. But in the midst of those giants of the faith, John the Baptist stands like a colossus. Everybody else looks tiny in comparison because Jesus goes, there's nobody. Nobody is greater than John. No one at all. Pick someone. Go on, pick someone. Noah, no. He's not great. Moses, he's not even close. Abraham, come on, Jesus. The religious guys, Abraham. He's the father. No one great. And then he says these words. He says, yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. I distinctly remember the moment where that made sense to me. Because we read the heroes of the faith. But Jesus says, well, John was better than all of them. And even if you're the least, the absolute least, even if you've just about tripped over the line into following Jesus, even if you've managed just to kind of get your hand across the line by your fingertips, even me, with all my flaws and all my failures and all my mistakes and every disaster that I can conjure up so easily, even me. Greater than that. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesus. Let me just get this clear. I'm greater than the one who baptized you. Yeah. I'm greater than the guy, he was your cousin. Yeah. Greater than that. It was like a light switch going on in my life. I started to think about it. I thought, that blows me away. That blows me away. There's somebody in the Bible who is the pinnacle, is in comparison to you and I, down at the bottom. The Colossus is actually the midget. The giant is actually the grasshopper. And we walk in, and God sits on the edge of his throne and says, I just can't wait to see what you're going to do when you realize who you are. My problem was I didn't get it. I didn't realize who I was. You ever seen The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Or maybe you read the books. Please tell me you read the books. There's a great moment in the middle of that book where the children have met Mr. and Mrs. Beaver and they're helping them understand about Aslan. And this is the quote that I want us to read together. Pop it on the screen for me. It says this. Aslan, says Mr. Beaver, is a lion, the great lion. Oh, said Susan. I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good, because he's the king, I tell you. And this was my moment. I hated being safe. And I had grown up in church where everybody was safe in their faith. It was just safe. We wouldn't believe for anything too big, just in case it didn't happen. We wouldn't risk anything too far, just in case it didn't land the way we thought it would. We wouldn't invite too many people in case too many people blew us out. We wouldn't dare to dream of what the church could be, because what if it didn't happen? We were so safe. This passage that we read where it talks about that we're greater than he is. Verse 12 then goes on and Jesus says this, from the days of John the Baptist till now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing and forceful men lay hold of it. That is not the language of safe. That is not the language of let's try and pan it out. Let's try and play it out. Let's see which way the chips fall. Let's try and work it out. That is not the language that Jesus talks. I mean, I'd seen cautiously advancing. Let's, maybe we had a couple more chairs. Maybe, maybe we can afford to take someone on 2 days a week. Maybe we should put on, one evening's support for the lost and the broken. Maybe we should just do, I'd seen cautiously advancing. I'd seen carefully advancing. So thoroughly planned that there was no space for a move of God. So thoroughly planned that there was no opportunity for a supernatural moment where God could speak to someone and everything could take off at high speed. I'd seen that. I'd seen curiously advancing. I wonder if God will be there. I wonder if God will even show up. And I'd seen not advancing. Because fear held people back. But I met that man that day, and I listened to him preach, and for the first time ever, I understood someone who just believed the only option was to forcefully advance. It wasn't an option in the list of possible options. Curiously, cautiously, carefully, don't advance, forcefully advance. What do you want to do? It was the only option for how he was prepared to live his life. Forceful advancement was the only option on the table. In fact, it wasn't even on the table. He'd already taken hold of it. He was determined to live that way. And I looked at that and said, that is not safe. And I love it. I love that idea. That we don't sit back and work it out and plan God's dream. But instead we forcefully advance. The kingdom of heaven is forcefully advancing. It's the picture of an army storming a city and rushing through the gates and rushing through the streets of the city. When I walk through our city, and most days of the week I take a walk into the city, not to get lunch, often just for a walk. Take a walk in the city, and I walk around the city, I think, God, forcefully advance in our city. God, forcefully advance in our city. God, cause the church to rise up and forcefully advance in our city. Cause us to stand up, to rush the gates of the city, to push through, to break through, to change this place. God, do something different. Forcefully advancing. Man, I kept looking and going, God, that's what I want. And we'd talk about things as church leadership, and there was another idea. Or another, and I was like, no. Forcefully advancing. Forcefully advancing. I want to declare this over us as a church. People will pour through the gates of this building as we forcefully advance into the city. You know the eureka moment that happened where the guy jumps into the bath, the water jumps out of the bath? Displacement happens. I believe there is a spiritual displacement to happen in this city, that when we live our lives passionately in the gateways outside of the building, that when we live that way passionately, it displaces people out of their lifestyle into the gates of this building and transforms who we are as church, because our capacity to throw the weight of God into the life of the city causes lost people to find themselves thrown back into the heart of God. Forcefully advancing. It literally means to break through the gates of the city. You know, when I was growing up young in church, the devil was given so much power by the church. So much strength, so much authority. But when Jesus talks in Matthew 16:18, and he says to Peter, on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades will not be able to stand against it. Gates are not an offensive weapon. You know, what army thinks, hey, we're going to go into war, and we've brought our gates with us. Because gates are terrifying. Gates, the sole purpose of gates is the defense in war, is the defense of a city. So Jesus speaks to Peter and he says, Peter, on this rock, on your confession of who I am, on your confession, the gates of hell cannot stand against the confession of who I am in your life. They just can't stand against it. So when Jesus talks in Matthew 11 about forcefully advancing, he's talking about us tearing down, knocking down the gates of the city. Knocking down the gates of hell. Hell is not something to be feared. It is a place to be plundered. Hell is not something for us to sit back and hope it doesn't assault us and come towards us. It's a place to press into, to break into, and to pull people out of. That's the purpose of it. That's the call on us. Forcefully advancing. Forcefully advancing. It's your confession that's the power, though. Peter's confession. Jesus saying, who do people think I am? People come with all sorts of crazy ideas, because nobody really wanted to nail their colors to the mast. And then Jesus says, you are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. Wow, if there's a trajectory changing moment, that's it. When you confess who Jesus is, it changes the trajectory of your life completely and utterly. Peter confesses that, and Jesus says, Peter, on this rock, on your confession of who I am, I'm going to build the church. The gates of hell won't stand against it. Let me speak to you now. On the confession of who you say Jesus is in your life is your capacity to defeat the attacks of the enemy against you. That's the capacity of it. I am. Before we went on holiday, I've just come back from holiday, which is why I'm wearing a white shirt, because I'm a little bit brown. It's true. Thank you. A little concerned that was false. Before I went on holiday, I slipped a disc in my back. And pretty painful. Been to the physio. Prayed, been to the physio. Both things. Both are good. Then went on holiday. Plane flight, no problem. And nice holidays. Lying in the sun, getting the heat on it. Swimming in the pool, all good. Last day, tripped up a step. Oh, I tell you. Wasn't pretty. Flew home through that little bit of turbulence, landed with a drop. Wasn't pretty. Wasn't nice, that. Oh, man, this morning in church, man, I'm struggling. I mean, I'm sat in the chair, first service, listen to Pastor Glenn, great message. I'm just in pain, get to the end, get to stand up. I just say, you know what, can't sit through a second message. I could have sat through his message twice, but I couldn't actually sit physically, so I stood at the back. Felt a lot better. Didn't jump this morning. I get to this evening, I'm going, God, I know what I need to preach. My confession of who you are is you're my healer. Because I want to bring you a praise that's worthy of who you are. I don't want the praise to be based upon my circumstance, which is that my back is sore. So I'm making a decision about what I'm going to do right now. So I'm just going to go for this. What your confession is determines what you defeat. So if your confession is that he is your healer, then you're going to defeat sickness. The power of Michelle's story is not that Michelle's really nice and God thinks she's his favorite, although Michelle would think that. The power of it is the power of her and Mark together making declarations over her life, over her health, and over her body that Jesus was the healer. It happens in all sorts of places. If you're struggling in financially, if the assault is against your finances, it is your confession that he is your provider that is the weapon that you use to break down the gates of the enemy that feel have locked you up. It's the confession that you use. You've got to find what it is that you need to confess. If you feel like everything's dying around you, I've got great news for you. You can confess a resurrected Savior who defeats death every single time that he faces it. Death has no hold on a follower of Jesus. It has no power. It has no control. When my dad passed away, we were dealing with the undertaker, which is what you do. And in the middle of it, we were trying to explain to him how we wanted the service to go. So we're going, we don't need anyone carrying the coffin in. Well, why? Well, we just don't need it. It's not important. It's not a money issue. We just don't need it. All right, okay. And then what do? Well, at the end, just take the body away. He's going, what do you mean, just take it away? Well, just take it away and do whatever you do. Well, you've got to come to the crematorium. Why? He says, well, that's what people do. But we don't want to. Well, why don't you want to? Because he's not there. That's just the shell that held my dad. We don't need to go in this ceremony that's bizarre when you stop and think about it. We don't need that. We're celebrating his life. We're mourning his death, but he's gone. See, when we get a good understanding of what we believe about death, we can deal with it so much better. It's when we don't understand that death is a pause, not a full stop. When we realize that death is a pause, that in the moment, in the twinkle of an eye, a person passes from this life to life eternal if they're a follower of Jesus, that all we're doing is, my dad left behind a shell, and we had to deal with how we felt about it. Resurrection and life is powerful. Forcefully advancing means you can stare death in the eye and say, do you know what? Paul said it like this: if I die, I'm going to be with Christ. If I stay, I'm going to be with his body, the church. win. Our confession is powerful. If you confess joy in sorrow, it's a powerful confession. To confess that you're filled with joy, peace in turmoil, forceful advancement. But it says this, that forceful men lay hold of it. And this is what I realized I wanted to be. I wanted to be a forceful man for God. The best translation, you're going to love this, is heroic enthusiast. Who doesn't like being the hero? I mean, what is there something in our wiring that loves the idea of heroism? That loves the idea of that moment where we decide, man, I can be that forceful person. I can be that hero. I can be the one who achieves the dream that is set before me. I can be the one who wins. There is a declaration that I want to make over us as a church. We win. Church, we win. We don't make that statement to celebrate the end. We make that statement as a trigger to the beginning. We win is the starter's gun of everything that we face in living for God. We win. We win. We're going to build a massive church in Manchester. We win. We're going to see the city transformed through the power of us working in our gateways. We win. We win. But I'm going to see the families transformed right across the city. We win. We're going to see the economy take an upturn in our city. We win. We win is a declaration of everything the Bible speaks and the Bible says that is true. We win is not circumstantial. We win is about what we believe. We win. We win. I started to try and get a hold of this stuff. To understand we're forcefully advancing. That I am a winning, heroic enthusiast for what I am doing. And this was my challenge. It didn't fit my personality. But it was who I was called to be. So I wrestled with it. And here's the best part. I wrestle with it. I wrestle with it on the days where I don't feel like winning. I wrestle with it on the days where I just don't feel like anything. I wrestle with it on the days where I feel like I lost. I wrestle with it on the days where I feel no enthusiasm and I am not the hero of the piece. I wrestle with it in the days where I feel like I'm forcefully retreating. But I keep coming back to it and keep saying, God, but you said. And by a declaration of my faith, you said that on the rock of what I declare, you'll defeat the gates of the enemy. So I'm declaring, I win. Oh, I expect everything I go against is going to go my way. I expect every opportunity that comes before me, I'm going to step into it and it's going to work out incredibly. I've got an expectation that every time something stands up, I'm just going to force it. I'm going to bulldoze right the way through it. Because we're forcefully advancing. I started to read the Bible different. Things started to seem different. I started to think, God, I'd like to be like that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'd rather die than bow down to the enemy. I'd rather die. And that's a whole different way of facing life and thinking about life. I'd like to lead to the idea that the disciples left everything to follow him in a moment. Don't think about it, just do it. Leave it all. Okay. Others didn't. Rich young ruler, give all your money, follow me. No, not doing that. Disciples, follow me now. Come in. There's a heroism to that. I like the idea of warriors facing giants. Love that. The little boy in me loves the idea of a sling and a stone and a giant and knowing how that ends. I love that idea. I love that prophets face down kings and challenge them with how they act. I love the audacity of the Apostle Paul to make a statement like this: follow me as I follow Christ. I mean, that's audacious in its very core. I'm so worth following. You should follow me. Oh, there's a boldness to that is striking. I love that tortured men sang at midnight. Gets to the middle of the night, they've been beaten through the day. They've been hung in stocks. So their response is to praise. Oh, That is forcefully advancing. That is heroic enthusiasm. That is people who know they're going to win. They've just got to do something to cause victory to come into their lives. I love that idea. I love the lepers who sit outside the city wall and they say, if we go back, we're going to die. If we go left, we're going to die. If we go right, we're going to die. But if we go forward, we might live. Let's go forward. What's the worst that can happen? We live. We win. We forcefully advance. We're heroic enthusiasts. And they discover an empty camp. Why? Because the gates of the enemy have been broken down by the power of God. And they plundered what the enemy held. And I love the men who brought the crippled guy to Jesus and ripped the roof off. I mean, that's like, come on, let's go on the roof. Imagine one of them going, why are we going on the roof? We're going to rip the roof off. Nobody rips the roof off to get in a house. First time for everything. And they just kind of start to rip the roof. I love that. But like you and I forget who I am. And I have days where I'm not who I'm called to be. And then I remember. So I'm preparing this the last 2 days. I have cried as I've gone, God, thanks for the reminder of who I am. When I forget and I get petty. God, when I forget and I get just a little bit tense and tight, God, keep reminding me, this is who I am. It was one day, one weekend. I don't remember a lot of the details of the messages, but I remember the feel of who I was called to be. And my trajectory changed completely. We're going to pray in just a moment. But Pastor Paul reads us some of this morning. He talked about, that there's not the good old days. These are the good old days. It says in Corinthians, God says this, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. What encourages me with God is this. It's always now. I don't have to wait for anything. I don't have to wait for a moment. I can remember who I am right now. I can live as who I am right now. I can step up into all God's called me to be right now, because now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the moment. Now is the opportunity. Now there is favor. Now there is salvation. Now there is hope. In Zechariah chapter 9, my time's nearly gone. In Zechariah chapter 9, the people of Israel are trying to rebuild their city, and Zechariah prophesies, and he declares to them this: become prisoners of hope. Become prisoners of hope. Be captured by hope. So much so that it holds you to it, and all you can be is filled with hope. All you can be is believe that now is the opportunity. Now is the time. Now is the moment that I can step up. I want to call you, church. I want to call you up to forcefully advance. I want to call you up to be a heroic enthusiast for God's purposes in your life. I want you to get a declaration on your lips. We win. Whatever we're facing, we win. Whatever's before us, we win. Why do I want to do it? Because I don't want us to be safe. I want us to be good. Because God is good. And He does good things. But I don't want us to be safe. I want us to make a decision. God, I believe that you want to change the trajectory of our lives. The change of trajectory doesn't take a lot. A few millimeters here becomes miles further down the line. A couple of degrees of change becomes kilometers further on. But God's speaking right now. And He's challenging us.